That reminds me of a scene straight out of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The Canadians stopped them by firing across the river.
Dans les cantons de l'Est, par le cœur du Québec. Riche en histoire, culture et hospitalité, ils offrent quelque chose à faire à chaque personne pendant toute l'année. En vous immergeant dans les collines vibrantes et les forêts luxuriantes, c'est très facile de penser que vous vous êtes téléporté dans un conte de fées. Et finalement, n'oubliez pas de visiter ces parcs nationaux, une expérience exceptionnelle en beauté, diversité et découverte. Allons-y. Before we head into Canada, we're kicking off the trip by hiking up Mount Pisgah in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. It's 1.9 miles or about 3 kilometers one way to the summit on well-maintained paths. Mount Pisgah is only about an hour's drive from Sherbrooke, Quebec, which will be our home base as we explore Les Cantons de l'Est, or the Eastern Townships.
Feel it right now, but there's going to be a really nice breeze up at the top there. Whew. Well, if you're wondering why the first part of the hike was so steep, it's because you were climbing up this. Hallelujah, a flat spot. Oh, here we go. Up again. At some point, this hill's got to stop going up. Whew. Yeah, you never need a reminder of how out of shape you are. Hike up these dang hills. Look at that. We made it to the summit, which is just a pole in the woods here. I think we're approaching the lookouts here, the west lookouts. Get a look of this lake lookout. This next chapter has been really 2.5 years in the making, really since the beginning of COVID, so it's still kind of hard to believe that it's finally here, but it's an amazing place to start it. It really is. Without further ado, I think it's time to head for Quebec. Problem with hiking past the summit is then you got to hike back up to the summit to get down, but that was worth every bit of it for that view. It really was. Well, here we are back at the summit. It's all downhill from here. Well, we are just about up to the international border, so I will see you on the other side in Canada. So we're just about to set off for our first day of adventuring here in Quebec. Our first stop is at a place that reminds me of a scene straight out of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which we'll get to in a sec. And then we're going to go drive La Route des Sommets, or the Summit Route, through Les Cantons de l'Est, the eastern townships. It's supposed to be spectacular, and it's something I've always really wanted to do for a long time, so let's go. So you may remember that great scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they show up to the castle that's occupied by the French guys with the Trojan horse, and the French guy at the castle keeps saying, "Fetchez la vache, fetchez la vache." Well, this roadside attraction actually has nothing to do with the movie itself, but I can't help but think of the movie, so I hereby give you Observe-toi la vache.
La Route des Sommets, or the Summit Route, runs for 200 kilometers through the heart of Quebec's eastern townships. It's an easy day trip making a loop from Sherbrooke, and make sure to brush up on your French. Once you get away from Sherbrooke, there's very little English spoken out in the townships.
Feels great to be back on dirt roads, back in my happy place. Pretty spectacular, pretty spectacular.
From the town of Ham-Sud, the route winds past beautiful hills, mountains, and lakes, as well as several national parks such as Mont-Ham and Frontenac. As you reach your easternmost point at the town of Lac-Drolet, turn south where you'll visit Lac Mégantic, the site of Canada's deadliest rail disaster, before ending your journey at Parc National du Mont Mégantic.
So one thing I love about traveling out here in the summertime through farm country is the fresh fruit stands, and we just scored big time. Get a load of these strawberries. And I got 2 huge cases of them in the back.
On July 6, 2013, an unattended freight train carrying crude oil broke loose and rolled downhill, derailing and exploding in downtown Lac Mégantic. The blast killed 47 people and burned half of the buildings in the town center. After the fire was put out, officials had to demolish all but 3 of the remaining buildings downtown due to petroleum contamination. Today, the new downtown is as vibrant and bustling as ever, but the deserted site of the old downtown is a stark reminder of that fateful day. Your final stop on La Route des Sommets is at Parc National du Mont-Mégantic, which is located just a stone's throw from the New Hampshire border near the town of Val-Racine. The park is the first international dark sky preserve in the world and is home to some of the best stargazing in the Americas. Do note CEPAC has jurisdiction over the park, so your Parks Canada passes will not get you in. When you check in at the Visitor Center, you'll be given several options for getting up the mountain, but after yesterday's hike up Mount Pisgah, there was really only one option that jumped out at me: Le Sommet en voiture, the summit by car.
So our first stop is going to be at the summit of Mont-Mégantic, which is where the observatory is. I had originally hoped to do possibly come do some dark sky photography out in these parts tonight, but even though the weather's nice now, it doesn't look like the weather is going to cooperate later. So summit by day we'll have to do.
Your entrance ticket gives you access to 2 summits, Mont-Mégantic and Mont-Joseph. You'll find stunning 360-degree views from atop both mountains. The area surrounding the observatory is open to the public, but if you want to go inside, you'll need to book a tour. You can make tour reservations either online or at the visitor center, but be aware tours are only given in French.
Well, Mont-Mégantic was pretty amazing views, and now we're going to head up to the other summit of the other mountain in the park, which is Mont-Joseph. Oh, so good. This is quite a hill. Quite a hill. Well, we are officially heading west now.
Our final stop in Quebec is at the site of La Bataille de la Châteauguay. A key moment in the War of 1812, the battle marks the only time in history when the United States and Canada have engaged in active combat against each other. On October 26, 1813, American troops invaded Quebec. They hoped to capture Montreal and cut off the main British supply line into Canada. A grossly outnumbered Canadian militia was waiting for them about 20 kilometers south of Montreal. This is the story of what happened. You're looking at a diorama of the Battle of the Châteauguay. The blue lights represent the American troops, while the red lights represent Canadian troops. On October 21, 1813, American troops began their invasion of Quebec and were advancing along the north bank of the Châteauguay River. Canadian Lieutenant Colonel Charles de Salberry ordered his men to build an abattis of felled trees to block the road. Behind the abattis, 500 Canadian troops destroyed all bridges that crossed the river and established defensive entrenchments roughly 200 meters apart. Salberry placed 600 reserve troops at nearby Wright's Farm and La Fourche. The next morning, American troops set up camp on the north bank of the river. By October 23rd, Major General Wade Hampton assembled nearly 3,000 troops and was ready to lead the American army in the battle. General Hampton devised a strategy to send a group of soldiers along the south bank of the Châteauguay River and attack the Canadians from behind. A second group would advance along the north bank and mount a frontal attack at the abattis. On the evening of October 25th, American Colonel Robert Purdy led a group of 1,000 soldiers across the Châteauguay River and deep into the marshy woods. The next morning, General Hampton ordered his troops to attack the Canadian abattis. The Canadians successfully countered the attack. Hampton waited for Purdy's troops to attack from behind, but they had gotten lost in the marshy woods and were nowhere to be found. While Hampton waited, Salberry reinforced the Canadian defensive position. By mid-afternoon, Americans continued to advance along the north bank. Salberry got creative and tricked them into thinking the woods were full of Native Americans. The Americans on the north bank retreated, allowing Salberry to reinforce the south bank. There, Canadian Generals Daly and Brugiere were wounded, causing the Canadian militia to retreat. As the Canadians retreated, the Americans assumed they were victorious and followed the retreating troops. When they came out of the marshy woods, they found themselves completely surrounded directly in front of the Canadian post on the north bank. As the two sides exchanged gunfire on the north bank, Daly and Brugiere's troops, which had originally baited the Americans to follow them, re-established position on the south bank and fired on the Americans from across the river. The attack was devastating. The Americans fled into the forest in a state of complete disarray.
So you're standing right here, pretty much where the Battle of the Châteauguay took place. The river behind me, on this side of the river, is where the Canadians had set up their camp, and the Americans had come up both sides of the river, and they came up the other side first, and the Canadians stopped them by firing across the river, and then they came up this side of the river second, and the Canadians turned them back here as well. And then
the Canadians waited for 4 days for another attack, but that attack never came. The Native Americans had chased Hampton's troops south, past the Châteauguay Four Corners. On October 29th, the Americans crossed the border back into New York. Quebec was not attacked again during the war. On Christmas Eve 1814, the two sides signed a peace treaty ending the War of 1812. That treaty was the start of more than 200 years of friendship between Canada and the United States, and also the first step towards the longest undefended border between two countries in the world.
Wow, that was just an absolutely fascinating piece of history, a fascinating history lesson, and that just really blew me away, just how cool of a spot that was. So if you're ever up in the Montreal area, stop by the Battle of the Châteauguay. It's probably about 40 or 50 kilometers south of the city, so it's not terribly far if you're nearby. Place actually reminds me a lot of Lake Tahoe, just with...
Next time, take in a little Canadian island life as we soak in the dog days of summer on the laid-back shores of Ontario's Great Lakes. Tour Manitoulin Island and hike along the world-famous Horseshoe Bay inside Puckasaw National Park. You'll also drive the stunning Canadian leg of the Lake Superior Great Circle route. Oh, and did I mention there's more waterfalls too? It's all part of the next big adventure on this cross-Canada trip. See you in Ontario.